Okay, great. So before I begin, I'm talking about the psychosocial criminology, the integrative look at recidivism. I'd like to first thank Mr. McAlpin, Dr. Linda Dahlquist, and Dr. Pamela Mulligan-Geinhart for their hard work, dedication, and insight over the past year. Without them, this surely wouldn't have been possible. So to begin, there's 6 celebrities up on the board. Robert Downey Jr., Michelle Rodriguez, Justin Bieber, Lindsay Lohan, Jose Canseco, and O.J. Simpson. Besides being celebrities, what do these all have in common?
They have a record.
Correct. Not only do they have an arrest record, they've all committed a crime within 36 months. That's called recidivism, and that's what I'm looking at. Recidivism can be looked at from a psychological and a sociological perspective. The psychological definition of recidivism is repetition of a delinquent or criminal behavior. Now, the sociological definition is a little bit different. It's looking at the behavior of a repeat or habitual criminal quantified by the rate of quantified by the rate of crimes committed post-release. Let's move on. Here's some interesting statistics. In Baltimore City in 2010, 45% of people arrested will have been rearrested within 12 months. Additionally, 3 out of every 4 people will have been arrested again within 36 months. It costs $20,000 a year to just house an offender. And additionally, it costs $200 billion a year to fund the criminal justice system. And in Baltimore in 2012, there were 112,000 arrests for a population size of only 619,000. That's nearly 1 out of every 6 people getting arrested. To move on, we see this map up here of the world. Every country highlighted in orange has a population size lesser than the United States has incarcerated criminals. These include some pretty prominent countries like Serbia, Finland, Denmark, Norway, Ireland, Uruguay, and Croatia. Certainly not superpowers, but pretty prominent in the economic world. So to move on, why should we look at an integrated approach with recidivism? Certainly this is way too complex just to look at from a psychological perspective, a sociological perspective, or even an ethical perspective. So I use the concepts of redefinition. And for redefinition, it's Matthew Miller. He looked at what we have to do is we have to accept the definitions at hand. We accept the psychological definition, we accept the sociological definition. However, from there, I use his strategy to make a new definition for recidivism, which is the repetition of a criminal behavior measured by the rate of an offender commits a secondary deviant act. Secondly, I used Miller and Boymansia's bridging strategy of a compound concept. Now, a compound concept is used to summarize and stand for some integrative understanding. The compound concept that I created and examined was psychosocial criminology. Dr. Joseph Gadd, he is a psychosocial criminologist. He defines this as a problem that is way too big and way too complex just to look at through a psychological or sociological perspective. So we need the concept of psychosocial criminology. And finally, I looked at building complex and multicultural relationships. Certainly the roots of recidivism, why people commit crimes, it's way too complex, again, to look at just through one perspective. As you'll see in the upcoming slides, I look at all the theories that psychologists and sociologists have compiled. My methodology, I use an extensive literature review. Firstly, I examine the aspects of recidivism from the psychological and sociological perspectives. Secondly, I looked at programs, what types of programs are and how effective they are. And third, I looked at the future of recidivism. Where should we go from here? Let's move on. Now, these are the psychological perspectives of recidivism. These include mental health disorders, conditioning, psychological sense of community, and rewards punishments. Now, say we have a criminal. He robs convenience stores. He is being conditioned to rob these convenience stores because he's had success. As he has success, the money, all the money that he gets from robbing these convenience stores, all the goods that he gets, that's encouraging him to continue. That's making him go forward. However, if he gets arrested, that's a punishment. However, if he once he gets released from prison, if he doesn't have a strong psychological sense of community, which is if he feels disconnected from the community, he's more likely to recidivate. We can also look at this from the sociological perspective. We can look at strain theory. So if we're looking at this same guy robbing convenience stores, he's committing this crime because he feels this is his best chance to achieve what he defines as success. For success to get the goods he wants and the money, the cars, the nice things that he feels are out of reach from his socioeconomic class. You can also look at labeling theory. So after he commits his first deviant act and he ends up in prison, he gets released and he's called a criminal now. So since he's a criminal, he thinks he needs to behave in a criminal type of way. So he's going to go ahead and continue committing these acts because he is a criminal. And third, we look at Hershey's social bond theory, which states that social bonds are protective factors against recidivating. So you have attachment to a family member or close friend, commitment to a community or a church, involvement in your church or community, and belief in yourself that you don't have to commit crimes to be successful. So the current recidivism programs that are out there right now are education-based, substance abuse-based, employment-based, and faith-based. The education-based aims to increase education because an education seemingly decreases recidivism. So what they do is they get the criminals in prison right now a GED, try to get them a little bit more educated so they have more opportunities. It's said that 7 out of 10 prisoners are at the lowest literacy levels in prison right now. And education-based programs have seemingly seen a drop in recidivism by 41%. Secondly, we look at substance abuse programs and also psychological assessments. Only 13% of inmates that need treatment in prison right now actually receive it. And only 62% of prisons actually screen for substance abuse or mental health disorders as soon as they get into prison. This looks at replacing negative emotions and replacing them with positive interactions. It seemed to reduce recidivism rates by also 41%. The employment-based looks to improve job skills so that people will be more hireable as soon as they are released from prison. Dr. Lawrence Freeman reports that only 1 out of every 3 bosses will actually hire an ex-convict. This really puts them in a terrible spot as soon as they leave prison. Excuse me. So if they can improve their job skills, they'll be more hireable and they'll be more desirable to employers. This is shown to work and reduce recidivism by 37%. Finally, we look at the faith-based programs, which look to develop a sense of community and develop a commitment to a higher power. Some of these programs have seen recidivism reduced by up to 60%, although they may be a little bit biased due to small survey size. So from there, I compiled what I've learned from this entire thing. And what I believe is that we need an idealized, centralized program in state prisons. Firstly, we're going to look at the program introduction. Once criminals or defenders are introduced into the penal system, they should go through a introduction into what opportunities the prisons have to improve them rather than, or to rehabilitate them rather than make them suffer. Secondly, there needs to be a thorough examination of mental health and substance abuse. This will help offenders become clean, and this will make sure that all the offenders get the necessary help that they need, and as often as they need. Third, we look at educational classes. As mentioned, that the programs have seen reduced recidivism through educational classes. However, my idealized program would make sure that every offender gets a GED at least. Those who want to move on to a higher education will be allowed to. Not only that, but they should teach real life skills. By real life skills, I mean how to balance a checkbook, how to do your taxes, how to write a resume, and how to interview. These will surely advance them in life. Fourth, we look at faith-based classes, if applicable, not necessarily necessity. However, this would also ensure that those offenders would be able to have the opportunity to attend daily services of whatever religious practice they observe. Fifth, we look at work experience. And this would be a 20-hour minimum a week job for nonviolent offenders. This would help improve skills such as communication, working together, problem solving, things that are actually applicable in real life. And sixth, we look at advising. With 6 months to go in an offender's sentence, I believe that the prison should actually appoint an advisor to the offender. That way that they can learn what to expect when leaving prison, so how to reintegrate into the community again, And also, I believe that they should help link with the job, so that once the offender does get released from prison, they have some place to go where they have a job, they have a steady income, so they don't have to commit a crime to support themselves. And lastly, we look at a follow-up within the community, and this is after the offender is released into society, and this would help. This would be like a community-based treatment program, sort of like Alcoholics Anonymous, where these people have a chance to talk about some things that might be happening in their lives, and then they can use each other to help support each other. Lastly, we're going to look at what does this all mean. It's said that the United States thinks of prisons as more of a retribution, an adult timeout for people that actually that commit crimes. Rather, we should be looking at rehabilitation. We saw that statistic that it costs $200 billion a year to fund the criminal justice system. However, if we were able to rehabilitate rather than make them suffer for crimes that they committed, we can actually reduce costs. Some studies have said that each program could actually reduce costs by up to $3.6 million a year. So James Cole, the United States Deputy Attorney General, actually recently commented on this, and I'm going to read you what he said. "It is necessary to change our ways of thinking. It may mean re-examining and, where appropriate, challenging conventional wisdom and investing in innovative strategies for equipping those who leave our prisons with the necessary skills and support to re-enter society." So certainly, recidivism can improve. It's a matter of can we make it improve. And with that, thank you very much. And are there any questions?
So just to kick it off, help me as an employer where I'm semi-informed and I know that a criminal has a 76% chance of repeat offences within a 36-month period. So I'm saying that's why I don't want to hire them. How does one tackle that from within the disciplines you've got?
So looking from within the disciplines, well, if you were to include these programs, and we can see that they do help reduce recidivism. A lot of people commit crimes again because they don't have any other place to go. And a lot of these crimes are robbing, breaking and entering. So it's more things that are monetary based rather than they're just committing crimes to commit crimes. So if they have a job, they don't necessarily need to commit crimes. They may, but they don't need to. And that's why it's important to have a job. If you look at it from Hershey's social bond skills, the attachment, commitment, involvement. If you have a job, you have attachment, you have a commitment, you have involvement, and you can develop a belief in yourself. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Get you next.
Please go ahead.
Do you feel like these programs that you would want to implement into the system would be appropriate for criminals who are getting life sentences, who obviously won't be released into society?
That's actually a very interesting point. I did not even cover that in my paper. However, I think that it would be helpful. They did something wrong where they have a life sentence, but that doesn't mean that they can't improve while in prison. And certainly there are ways that prisoners do contribute, especially with some of the work programs. They build toys, they do other types of things. So if they can get involved, they can definitely show that they have some type of improvement. Go ahead.
Did you consider people who were incarcerated but they were determined clinically insane and they were sent to like mental institutions as opposed to?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
So did you consider individuals who were charged with crimes but they were considered clinically insane and they were put into, psychological treatment facilities as opposed to normal prisons?
Actually, I didn't quite cover that. However, I did read a study that said only less than 0.8% of people that are charged with crimes are actually criminally insane. So it's not very quite applicable for the recidivism programs that I'm talking about. That would be more covered under the mental health aspect, which if they do somehow slip through the system of the court systems, the second aspect of my program, the thorough psychological exam, would really cover that.
Okay.
The two questions. The ideal centralized recidivism program, is that your idea? Is that your synthesis based on the research?
Correct. That's what I thought would be the best option to tackle recidivism.
So based on the literature, so that's the action that you're recommending based on all this research?
Correct. That's the bridging the explanation gap of Miller and Boyman and Cia. So from what the programs that I saw, they all worked. They all had their individual aspects about them that work, and I cover it more in depth in my capstone paper. But I think that if the states were to implement a more centralized program that could be run and that is actually offered in every prison, they would be able to have much more success. And a topic that I actually recently covered showed, I kind of mentioned it towards the end, kind of showed that these programs individually can cut costs by $3.6 million at a time. So if we were to take the hit as a society, this might be a little bit above right now, but if we were to take the hit as a society and put a lot of money into this right now, we could really, really reduce that $200 billion a year that we spend on the criminal justice system.
And my follow-up question is, did you only look at state programs, or did you also look at social entrepreneurial programs that employ ex-convicts?
Correct. I also looked at Mimi Silbert's Delancey Street.
That's what I was
And Mimi Silbert's Delancey Street, she has this integrative measure that she uses. She hires ex-convicts and actually houses them on Delancey Street. She has lived there for 30 years. And during her time there, she employs them, but they have to, and she also houses them for cheaper costs. However, they have to abide by a couple of rules. One is alcohol and drug free. That's an immediate way to get kicked out of the program. And secondly, she also makes sure that they have at least a GED. And thirdly, she obviously employs them. And before they leave the program, they actually have to be proficient in 3 different skill areas.
Very good, thank you.
Well, it's right on.
Oh, sorry.
No.
We're doing okay.
You make a convincing case, and it's a case that I think we've heard before, and thank you for your research and sharing it with us. Why the obstacles? Why, given what you're saying about the costs, et cetera,
Well,
is it not moving forward, or has it not?
Well, before you even look at the costs, you have to look at the stigma that criminals have. If you're once you're labeled a criminal, and it's like Lambert's or Labert's theory of labeling theory. Once you're labeled a criminal, that's almost a death sentence, really, in society, because then that follows you. That doesn't go away. That goes to every job you have, every type of opportunity that you get. You're labeled a criminal. So that's the first thing that would definitely need to be tackled. And secondly, the costs. I mean, if you look at the way our government is set up, it's a lot of its defense and military budget. We only put forth, I think it's maybe 8% of the $200 billion a year is really looking at preventing crime. So that's another way that.
How can we change that mindset, though, to apply that?
Well,
and maybe we don't have time for that.
It's a huge topic to cover. I briefly discussed it in my paper. But we can try to start changing the retribution versus rehabilitation. We look at, like I said, we look at prisons through a retributive mindset, where they go away, they do their time, and they get out of the society because they did something wrong. Rather, if we started looking at rehabilitation and changing the mindsets about people's stigmas that they have and trying to reintegrate them into society a little bit better, I think we definitely can start changing a few minds to increase budgets here and there.
Thank you for a short answer to a complicated question. I'm wanting to read that paper now and find out. Thank you very much indeed.
Great. Thank you very much.